My name is Dave Hollenbach, the host of From Embers to Excellence, a podcast that explores the many facets of leadership from the perspectives of some amazing people. We discuss the triumphs and failures that have shaped our lives and our leadership philosophies. I've found that it isn't whether we fail that defines us, but when we do fail, how we respond. Leaders dust off the ashes and use their failures as fuel to work harder and as lessons to come back wiser and stronger, more resilient, more determined, and more committed to excellence. Today I'm speaking with Robert Mattox. He is the author of two books, Dealers in Hope and Hope to Die. We'll talk a little bit about both of those today. He's also a TEDx speaker, where I'm actually going to have the link to his TEDx talk in the show notes. Also link to his website, foresightmarketingguide.com. To go further into who Robert is, he's a social entrepreneur who lives in the trenches of life. He is the executive director of a nonprofit, the Point Care Center. He's a business owner, a dad of 4 with 2 adopted teens. He has traveled in 20 countries, summited an 18,000-foot volcano, and also he is a Funko Pop collector. Thanks for coming on, agreeing to talk with me today, Robert. I really appreciate it. I was not aware of what Funko Pops were. You just enlightened me. And for all of those that don't know what it is, I guess you could Google it.
Absolutely. Any knowledge you need is on Google. Yeah, it's great. It's a privilege to be here with you, David. Thanks for, you go by Dave. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. I read a little bit about you and was like, man, I got to get this guy on the show. So I really am very appreciative that you agreed to come on. Recently, I listened to your TEDx talk where you speak of hope. And I was wondering, well, real quick before we dive into all of that, where were you born and raised, and what was it like growing up there? What were some of your early influences?
Absolutely. Yeah. So born in 73 in Dallas, Texas. And no, I'm not a Cowboys fan. I'm an Eagles fan. So which means that I got transported up north. So I have some from the South, but we moved so many times. Every 3 years, it seemed like we moved. And that wasn't because we were in the military, even though my wife's family had a lot of military. But yeah, growing up, we were in Texas, but the big change happened young. When I was 6 years old, my dad died of like a heart attack. And so when he died, my mom wanted to be closer to family. So we moved up to Pennsylvania, and then we kept moving back to Texas because we had a house there. So it was a lot of back and forth. And but thank God for the 80s, because the 80s was a great time period to grow up in. A lot of fun, a lot of good friends down the street from me, and just have great childhood memories with them. Two brothers really mark my childhood. And big wheels, and action figures, that kind of stuff. But so great childhood in terms of friends. Parenting, not so much. My mom was in her own kind of, I think she didn't really recover from that too well. She just had a struggle finding herself after my dad's death, and just kind of bounced around physically, like location wise, but also bounced around in her career, and just couldn't land on what she wanted to do in life. She ended up developing anxiety when I was in 8th grade. So this anxiety was crippling because it made it so that I had to go with her everywhere she went, which was really hard for me as I'm becoming a teenager and I want to become independent, right? And she's just kind of clinging to me. And but then her anxiety worsened, and it got into deeper stuff like paranoid schizophrenia, which it later became. And that was really hard to watch. But I kind of just disappeared at that time in her life, and let my grandfather take over. So my mom really wasn't there for me growing up. My dad wasn't there. So I kind of was this independent guy. And, that's kind of where I learned to be a self-starter and go-getter myself. But I had loving people in my life. They just weren't like deep into my life, mentors came by here and there. My youth pastor was awesome. My grandfather became important later on. So there were important people in my life that steered me in the right direction, which was good. So kind of like I guess I'm the first generation that stopped messing up their life. Like it seemed like my family members before me, I just seemed to make some bad decisions. And, I thank God for just putting me on the right track, so that's kind of my childhood experience.
Are you the oldest of the three brothers?
So it was my best friends were brothers, and I'm an only child. So it's just me. Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of questions. You might have said it and I just missed it, but how old were you when your father passed?
I was 6.
6.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was a truck driver. He he was a kind of a rowdy guy. He was actually, when my mom met him, he just came out of jail. So and he was in jail because he shot his ex-girlfriend in the arm for cheating on him. So he was they called him a rough redneck. But they say when I was born, he was converted. Like he became a Christian and he became radical in that. And so he even became a layman in his church and became even bold enough to stand up in the middle of a sermon and say, "Hey, I don't think that's what the Bible says." So he was a pretty radical guy. Too bad I missed out on that. And he's a fisherman. I would have loved to learn to fish, but yeah.
Well, what were some of the events leading up to where you are now? You're involved in so many things. You've traveled the world, and you're I don't know. I either read it or it was part of your TEDx talk, or I'm not really sure where this is coming from, but I would say that it's a very good descriptor of you, that you're a dealer of hope.
Yeah, that is a strange phenomenon about my life. So if you follow the Advent calendar, I don't know if you ever heard of they light candles during the Advent season, right at Christmas time. And the first candle to be lit is the Hope candle. And I was actually born on Hope Sunday. But I didn't know that until just a few years ago that I connected the dots. So I was born on Hope Sunday. My whole life has been marked by this theme of hope. And so that's kind of the only thread that you could probably trace in my life, because I've been all over the place, right? And no one can say, "Well, Rob, what's your career track?" Like I just tanked my career by not following a path. It was always kind of blazing a new trail. But anyway, so becoming this student of hope is like I guess it's been really part of my life for the last 20 years as an adult, where I've just started to really study hope and really kind of immerse myself in it. And then I got my master's degree in leadership track that I was able to study hope for a whole semester. And just for your listeners, I don't know if they know this, but so the positive psychology movement started in about the 50s, where before that it was like, hey, let's look at everything that's wrong with us and let's diagnose it. We have a whole book to point out what is possibly wrong with you, paranoid schizophrenia, ADHD, whatever it is. In the 1950s, they said, what if we actually looked at the positive stuff about humans, and how do we nurture and encourage that? How do we get more of that? And so from that started to take off, people, universities in particular, like even Harvard and University of Penn, University of Kansas, University of Oklahoma, they started looking at this phenomenon of hope, which hope used to be just like a church word or like a faith word. Any faith, would attach itself to it. Then it became cancer's number one word was hope. So then all of these nonprofits just link onto the word hope, but no one really knows what it is. And then universities come along and say, is this thing real? Hope, is it real? Can we study it? Can we measure it? Can we predict it? Can we actually produce it? And they all came back with and said, yep, it's real. And it's, it's kind of a no-brainer, but yes, it's real. Yes, you can measure it in someone's life. Yes, you can show someone how to grow their hope. So hope became like a real thing. And I started studying it and connecting dots between what Napoleon Bonaparte said, which was leaders are dealers in hope. And that, because I'd been studying leadership for a while, and now I was studying hope, I connect the dots. I'm like, okay, wow. So there's something here. Leaders need to deal in hope. And up to that point, I'd seen a lot of the opposite of that, leaders not dealing in hope. But anyway, that's kind of the thread, to answer your question. That's the thread that's gone through my life in a lot of different ways, including my daughter's name is Hope. We named her before she was born. Before I knew she was a girl, I was like, I just know it's going to be a girl, and we're going to name her Hope. And so she's 23. And then one of the sons that came to live with us when he was a teenager, he was 17 at the time. He lived with us 2 years. We ended up adopting him January of 2020. So he was about 19. He's 20 now. And he's from Afghanistan. And his Persian name, his given name is Omid. And the word Omid means hope. So I was like, well, that makes a lot of sense. It just seems like this is, just a stamp on my forehead. Hey, hope dealer, dealer in hope. But yeah, that answers your question, maybe.
Yeah, I'd love it if you went a little deeper into what you just said about hope and really tie that into leadership. I'm curious how you measure it and how you can grow it in somebody.
So there's over 2,000 studies that have been done on hope, and they all point to that the people with high hope have more successful and more meaningful lives. Okay, and that's like kind of a no-brainer, but the science has to be there. So these studies, Gallup in particular is doing a 10-year study in high schools, and they're measuring hope, engagement, and well-being. Engagement's a big thing in leadership, but hope too. They see the value of hope, and so they have a whole assessment tool that they use. They go into the high schools and they ask students these questions, and you can take the assessment. Maybe we can include it in your show notes. So I can show you where you can get a hope assessment. But so they're measuring things, and the kind of I guess the most popular assessment measures three things. The three things are willpower, so your agency, how much kind of drive you have for something. Your willpower, that kind of makes sense, right? Your way power. Now, this is a unique thing. Way means pathways. So when you have a goal, that's the third one, goal setting. So goal setting, willpower, way power. So the way power is like being able to see the path to your goal. And a lot of people can't. They can't see how to get there, right? They can't plot the course. And then leaders are supposed to be able to come along and be able to connect the dots for people and help them navigate change, help them navigate to get to their goal. That's what coaches do, help you get unstuck, help you get to your goal. So pathways, and a lot of people they might have high goal setting. They might just like dream for the sky, but next step, they don't know what their next step is. So that's where their hope starts to tank, because they can't see the way. Or if they get blocked on one way, they can't see alternate routes. And so that's key to, and you can read Grit by Angela Duckworth, and she has a chapter on hope in her book, but she talks about, resiliency and about these pathways and pathfinding. But so measuring those three things is kind of probably the most popular hope assessment. There's another guy I just got turned on to that's starting the Hope Institute, Anthony Scioli, and his stuff is brilliant. And I can't wait to get my hands on his hope assessment, because I think he's doing things that the others missed and or didn't want to include, or I have no idea, but he's on to something that's really important. So So yeah, that you're right. That's a great question, Dave, because I feel like everyone knows what hope is. Like you grow up, like you know what hope is, but yet at the same time, it's so elusive. You don't know how to define it, and you don't know how to get it when you feel down, or you don't know how to increase it. It's like this thing that disappears when you need it the most. So, yeah.
So how do you teach people to grow hope in themselves and in those that they're leading?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And first, let me tell you, kind of people have a definition of hope. They think it's just being, like optimistic. So what I'll just say, hope is not desire. It's not expectations. It's not positivity. It's not optimism. And the reason is that because it's much bigger than that. Like if we're talking about the most powerful forces in a human's life, the three biggest ones are probably hope, love, and faith, right? But there's grit, there's courage, there's others, but hope is one of the big ones. So it's way bigger than these things we think about. So how do they cultivate hope? That's a great question. I think the three things I tell people is they need a story, and story is key to human nature. Like we love going to the movies, we love telling our kids a bedtime story. Like they just eat it up all the time. We can't get enough stories. But when we look at our own lives and we look at the story of our life, we don't see how the plot is developing, and we don't take time to really see what kind of story we're in. A new book just came out. Donald Miller wrote a book called Hero on a Mission, and Finding a Life of Meaning. And he talks about your story. Like he's the big story brand guy, and building a story brand. And but he understands story really well. And he says, take a look at your life, find out what kind of story you're in. And if you don't like the story, then change it, right? So I think helping people get into a story. And here's the key. If the story is about you, your hope is probably going to go down, believe it or not. Like you think, oh, I'm going to become this great person, I'm going to build myself, I'm going to be awesome. But the more your story is about yourself, probably your hope is going to go down. It's like counterintuitive. So you need to be in a bigger story than you've ever been in before, something that's bigger than you. So everything starts, I think, there. And then your meta narrative. That's where religions come in. That's where family traditions come in. That's where, just kind of this like my genealogy, like who was my family, these bigger stories. If you're a citizen of the country, like, are you an American? Like your identity is a huge piece in this story. So you need to just lock down your story and your identity, who you are as a person. So that's the first thing, story. As I say, you gotta figure that out. Second, you need skills, just like every other kind of skill. Leadership skills, you need hope skills. There's coping skills, and then there's hoping skills. So I teach hope skills. And the third is you need a community. So you need people that, and I did this in my TEDx talk, I talk about different types of communities. There's a commiserating, get around people and let's just vent and bitch and moan and talk about how politicians suck. We could do that. Or we get around a community that builds one another up and encourages each other, challenges each other, sharpens each other. We contribute, they find value, I give value. That's a different kind of community. So those three things this is how I build hope in the people I'm around, I think.
You alluded to the definition, but I don't know that you actually gave the definition that you use for hope. Could you define it?
Yeah. So hope, it's my definition of hope. I thought about it. It took me about a good few months to think about it. So I just like delve deep, and I think for some people it's like love. How do you define love? Well, I love pizza. I love my mom. I love my dog. Is love the same definition for all those things? No, but we use love interchangeably for those things. So coming up with a definition for hope, I hope I win the lottery is way different than I hope that the Rams win the Super Bowl and I'm actually a player on the team with skin in the game, right? There's two radically different. One, all I did was pay $1. and hope I win. The other one is I've been sacrificing every day, working out with this team, bleeding and giving everything I got. This is Super Bowl time. Like I'm going to give it all. So there's it's a spectrum, right? There's a spectrum. So the way I define it is, and you'd have to read my book to understand really where I'm going with this, but the definition is orientation and action towards the most meaningful future. So orientation is a key word. Action is a lot of people think hope is just wishful thinking. They say, hey, don't hope for anything because that's just wishful thinking. But they have no idea what they're talking about when it comes to hope. They're just talking about the common vernacular we have for the word hope. Yeah, most of us use it like, I hope I win the lottery. But it's way deeper than that, and people experience it on a way deeper level than that. So it's orientation and action towards the most meaningful future. And it took me a long time to unpack that, but it has to do with orientation is going back into that story, going back into understanding where you're at in life and where you want to go. So if you were in the Navy, think of it as like navigation. You need to know orientation skills, right? Yeah. Orienteering.
Before we move forward, I will have links to your book in the show notes. So while we're on this topic, I found myself wondering, where am I going to get it? So just for the listeners, there will be a link so that you can go ahead and buy your copy. Because I'm very curious now about, well, not just the definition, but there are concepts there that tie directly to that grit factor when you're a leader and when you're leading a team and you're facing difficult odds or difficult circumstances, or you're facing a failure that you just experienced. A lot of times people will just throw their hands up and go, okay, well, I guess this isn't for me anymore. But those people that say, no, I know that there's more to this, and they have that story, like you're saying. They know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
They know what they're made of. They've been there before.
Mm-hmm.
They got that mindset that this isn't going to keep them down. They know if they keep going, they're going to achieve what they set out to do. And
Mm-hmm.
especially if it's tied to something much bigger than themselves.
Yeah.
So,
I
man,
think
that's
of
awesome, man.
I think of the founding fathers, for instance. The Declaration of Independence is beautiful because it talks about clear hope. Hope is defined. We want three things. We want life, we want liberty, and we want the pursuit of happiness. Those are the three things that we want. And now, is that just wishful thinking? They lay out in there the cost, like of what it's going to cost to get those three things. And it's beautiful writing because they parallel that with three things that they're going to have to pay. And they're going to have to pay with their lives. So they say we pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. So they're all in. Like there's nothing else to give. We're giving everything to secure life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for every single person that wants to be called an American from now until 2022, and beyond. So they gave it all. And that was huge, right? That was hope that was spelled out for us. And I think that's what we see with hope, is that hope has to be about shared values, shared struggle or shared pain, and shared fortunes. And that's where we get into a lot of problems. I think mostly is the vision of the future is about me getting my fortune, but somehow you didn't get yours. And that's where a lot of people feel left out. And that's where hope tanks. And this is where politicians tank, because they make tons of promises and someone's fortune is going to be a lot better than others, right? So it's hard to get everyone on board. So with hope, you know.
You told me a little bit about your other book, Hope to Die.
Mm.
That you said that it's somewhat of a memoir. Can you talk a little bit about that and and how that changed your life?
Yeah. So my dad died when he was 40, and so I wrote this memoir when I was about 40, and because I just thought, what if I have what he has, right? I mean, I went to the doctors; they said that my heart was different, but I just, it's in our genes, and so I just kind of was reflecting on death quite a bit at that age. So I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to dedicate a year to living as if this were my last year. And what would I do? And so the book has really two purposes. One is to help me focus, and then the other is to educate people on what hope is all about and helping them figure out how to live the rest of their lives meaningfully. That's kind of the journey that I took. And I didn't do the things that you would think someone would do if they really knew that this was the last year of their life. Like they would probably just go to Hawaii and party for a month. They would do those kind of things. But in mine, I said, no, I'm not gonna live these crazy things. I'm gonna dive into some more meaningful things. And so I spell those out in the book. What are the most meaningful things that we encounter in life? And one of them was just, I was working at a thrift store, right? I was a place I never wanted to be. Here I find myself in a thrift store. I hate thrift. I just didn't like anything that I was doing in life. And it was just seemed all meaningless to me. And so my prayer was, okay, God, help me find the meaningful in the meaningless, because this is a dumb job. But I was there for 6 years. And and the funny thing is that that's where I found probably um, the most meaning in my life. I was working with guys coming out of incarceration, and a lot of them were struggling with addiction. So this is really the hardest and darkest of times for them. They're coming out and they're working. I'm working alongside them at the thrift store because this is the only job that they can get. They're in a program for a year. They're learning to get employed, how to build their resume and how to work. One guy showed up and never even pushed a vacuum cleaner before. So it was just, some guys were coming from the streets, some were coming from, just hard families. But anyway, just those friendships were so meaningful to me. So it wasn't about the thrift anymore. It was about people and their journeys and their lives and the struggles. And so I got the opportunity to dive into their pain with them. And I read a story about a woman who came into the store, um, and she was like my mom. She just looked like she was struggling with anxiety and some sort of mental disorder. And it was actually a stormy day. Like there was a hurricane. I forget which hurricane it was. I have it in the book, but there was a hurricane, and it was like the hurricane blew her into our store, and she was going through her own internal hurricane in her own life. And we just had a chance to sit down and talk about her struggles and I was sharing a few things about hope with her. And she just, those moments, she was like, yes, that's what I need. Yes, that's what I want. It's just like you could tell that she was just on the edge, and she just needed hope. And I just had the opportunity to connect with her. And she volunteered. She wanted to volunteer, fill out an application, so that was meaningful to me. And those kind of stories, just being able to see the little things that became meaningful in a year that was kind of under the microscope.
So I've taught leadership for quite some time now, and all of it has been really in the context of you know the fire service or law enforcement or in the military. I did have my own business for a period of time, but I was working with friends and my younger brother. So it was kind of different because these were lifelong relationships. You tend to deal with those individuals in your life a little bit differently and I, you know, good, bad, or indifferent. That's kind of what I learned about myself. And when my brother passed away, it led to a really dark time in my life where I reflected back on that and wish I had done things differently. But when I teach leadership and really when I talk about that experience, it helps me relay the importance of it's a term I use called selfish altruism. You work really, really hard at developing yourself as much as possible so that you can add as much value to those people that you're leading, because your primary goal is to see them succeed far more than you could ever hope for yourself. If you put it in that context, whether it's realistic or not, if you have that mindset that you want to see them succeed more than you could ever dream of, then you'll work quite a bit harder at, well, developing those relationships with them so that you know what they need, know what their strengths and weaknesses are, what drives them, what their hopes and dreams are, and uh, and then you can better deliver as a leader. So I really, really like this conversation where we're talking about hope. And when you when you examine your life and identify what those things that you value most are, what a great way to distill it. Um,
Yeah. I like what you said, Dave, just that, when your success is linked to their success, that's a key aspect of hope. When you see that helping them succeed is important, that's like, I think your hope goes up, the meaning goes up. I agree with you. That's a great selfish altruism. I like it. I want to let you know too, I really, I'm thankful for your service in the military, and really appreciate those that are first responders and all those that are doing this kind of work. My father-in-law, big mentor of mine, leadership coach, taught me the most about leadership. He created his own leadership model, was a consultant, trained me as a leadership coach. And so I dove deep into these things. But he was in the Air Force for 8 years and a recruiter. And I met my wife because he happened to be in the same town as me. But his two sons, both in the military, both in the Air Force. His adopted daughter from Latvia, she went into the Coast Guard. Where my daughter also went into the Coast Guard. My adopted son, not the one from Afghanistan, the other one, he went into the Marines. He just got out of the Marines. And my wife's grandfather, he was in the Navy in World War II, right on throwing lobbing shells at what was it, Iwo Jima. He was cooking up the food while they were doing all the battles, in there. So he was in the Navy. Just a lot of military history in our family, and so really respect, the military. A lot of hope needed. Yeah.
It's interesting. I just recently interviewed this woman, um, and for the listeners, if this sparks your curiosity, if you haven't listened to this interview already, Laquita Munley, she is married to um, an army guy who's in first cavalry. Um, he did 24 years. He enlisted in the 90s and served Bosnia. It was after the first war in Iraq, um, but he served in Iraq and in Afghanistan, Turkey, Bosnia. The guy has seen a lot. what's interesting about this conversation that I had with her is, he was a career Army guy, career enlisted, eventually becoming, top of the non-commissioned officers. He was in charge of uh, quite a quite a few people. And when he was overseas deployed, she was really the leader of the spouses of the people he was deployed with. And this this hope, this message of hope and dealing in hope, I would imagine that she's really good at it. When your spouse is in a combat zone and communication isn't always possible, and you're hearing things through the media, and there's a lot of fear involved. Like, first, there's just like this whole area of maintaining the home and the children and the relationship while your loved one is facing an enemy that spends every day all day trying to kill you. And having that knowledge and being able to do nothing about it, you make the best of what you can do. And being able to teach the younger spouses how to manage day-to-day life and manage your emotions and really continue on. And in the face of that kind of, I mean, if you allowed it to be a negative experience, it would be. But to shape it into something positive and know that what you're doing matters in the big picture.
Yeah, that is huge. They're hope dealers, right? They're the moms and or the spouses that stay and hold down the fort and raise the kids and do the laundry while someone's off to war. I mean, hopefully they don't underappreciate their role, that they have. I mean, I just watched another war movie recently, and the crucial phone call back home to keep the morale up, of the soldier is so vital. Writing the letters during wartime is key to their being able to keep going. So that they are hope dealers, and the reason, part of the power is, one of the things that hope does is like an anchor, and it just keeps you tethered. It keeps you tethered to what is important. And so that phone call, those letters are the tether that reminds you of a life that what you're fighting for. It reminds you of who loves you, what's real, reality. I don't know if you ever saw the TV show Lost, but there's a great episode on hope, where the girl is the tether for him. Like, she keeps him knowing what reality is, because he is so confused, and she is his anchor. So they are huge hope dealers. Absolutely. And way to go, mom, or way to go, spouse who's staying behind. I told my daughter that she just got married. They're in the Coast Guard. They're separated. So she's in Long Island and he's in Seattle. So they're far apart, and they just got married, but the military hasn't joined them together yet. The orders haven't come through to make that happen. Hopefully that'll happen in a couple months here. But I said, my advice to them when I married them, I was like, you should write letters to each other. Like, I know email, I know texting, I know you can do a video, but trust me, write a letter out, and it'll really be meaningful. I have a whole shoebox of letters that my wife wrote me when she was living over in Latvia, and we were dating at the time, and a whole, like, maybe 100, 200 letters that kept our love alive. There's a lot. I was in college. There's a lot of girls walking by that looked pretty, and I used to have hair, and I looked good. So I mean, at any moment I could have been snagged up. But those letters, and she would put perfume on them, and man, I would just sit down and be in another world. Right? I would be in her world. So that tethered me to the hope of our love, that one day we would be united. One day we would get married. And it was worth waiting for. It was worth waiting for. So
one of the things that you were talking about there, the your story, and knowing who you are, knowing what you value, knowing what you stand for, what your identity is, it is so difficult for so many, especially, and I'm going to speak from experience right now. When I left the fire department, I'd spent 20 plus years referring to myself as a firefighter. That was my identity. You know, on my days off, I trained. I I would either train myself or I was training others. I studied leadership and firefighting, whether it be technical rescue or just fire dynamics, incident command, that sort of thing. That's what that was my life. And it took me a while after I left the fire service to really figure out who I was. Because I was no longer Chief Hollenbach. I was just Dave. that was how I felt, and now I'm very clear on who I am. There was an exercise that I did with my daughter, and part of really figuring out who you are is figuring out what your values are and what you stand for, and what your purpose is. And a big hint about purpose is, if you and anybody can do this, if you go back and read historical documents or philosophy, world religions, there's a common thread throughout where these ancient thinkers identified that we are all connected and we're here for one another. And that's why it feels so good to do right by other people that are close to us, to add value to them, because that is fulfilling our purpose. And however you live that, however you express that in your day-to-day activities, that's more specific to you, but it still is adding value to others, or action towards adding value to the world around you. When you're helping other people identify or build their story, or identify what their story is, how do you coach them through that process? Because typically when people are seeking hope or seeking answers, or they're at a loss. If you were to ask them, who are you? They probably wouldn't come back with much more than their name.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that is a great question. And I love diving into identity because like I put in the book, it took me so long to figure out who I was. I think men don't figure out who we are until we're in our late 30s. We just don't know. And so the way I do it is, it's in the book as well, Hope to Die, is talk about character. So character, this is a great word. So character really has three layers. There's the character, which is actually, in language, it's a mark. So a character is a letter, right? Second layer, character is like virtues. What's his character like? What values does he have? The third layer is a character in a story. Who are they? Are they the villain? Are they the hero? Are they kind of, just the bystander? Like who are they? The class clown? Who are they? So I dive deep into those. So for instance, in your life, character, like a marking, you wear a hat. You're known as a guy who wears a fireman's hat. That's a marking of you. If I see you probably more often in the week, you might be wearing that hat, or you wear hats. Tattoos are great markings for a lot of people. It's huge. Of this is identifies who I am, and this is a marking in my life. Wedding ring is another marking. It shows people that I'm married. You know, it could be anything, little things, big things that are marking. And then character values. It's like likes and dislikes, personality. There's a million personality, you know, assessments you can take. Myers-Briggs, DISC, you know, all those. It's just kind of your what you like, don't like, what you do in a certain situation, what you don't do. And then there's that deep layer of, am I the like savior, like a fireman? Am I a savior? Am I a warrior? Am I a soccer mom? Am I, you know, a nurse? Do I, you know, take care of sick people? Am I a healer? Am I, you know, those kind of deep layer things. And Tony Campolo said, you know, to find out your identity, you are what you're committed to. So you could be a father, but that doesn't make you a dad, right? Anybody can father, well, any guy can father a child practically, but are you a dad? Did you raise that kid? You know, that's different. So who you are is based on your commitments, you know. So that's how I walk someone through the identity piece. Like you were talking about, you know, you are a fireman. If there was a fire, you would probably still figure out a way to help someone get out of it. You are still a fireman, even though you might not go to the firehouse every day. That's kind of how I think about it. But it took me a long time to get those names into my mind of who I was and who I am. Yeah. So a lot of people put them on their Twitter handle, you know, or their Facebook profile or whatever. You know, I'm a dad. I'm a, you know, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a, you know, those kind of things.
But do you have a process that you walk somebody through to help them kind of identify who they are, or is that your process? You walk them through the three characters.
Yeah, I would definitely do the three characters with them to get the identity piece down. And then I would look at their story and see, I would look at their past, like, because there's labels that have been thrown on you that you've accepted, you know, like, and that's why it's hard to, we're still struggling and wrestling with what we've been described as by our friends, or like, he's the bozo, like he's the one that always gets drunk at the party. You know what I mean? Like you're known for certain things in the past. And you're like, well, is that still my story? Is that who I am? Do I still have to perform and be that person, or can I be someone different? So dealing with the scripts that we've accepted from our past and our childhood. So dealing with those on a deeper level. And then let's talk about your future self. What if you met your future self? What would they tell you? You know, and have that conversation with your future self. I find that fun, because who I want to be in the future is important. You know, they talk about hope as only future oriented, you know, it's only thinking about the future. But the thing about hope is that it's actually connected to the past, the present, and the future. If you can't draw a line through all three, you're not going to find meaning. You know, you can't just be future oriented. That's kind of my beef with the hope assessments that you can do today. It's all future focused. It's all goal setting, but it doesn't look at your present and your past, which are key to understanding, remembering. Memory is huge because like, let's say something happened to you. Let's say you got fired, you know, in the moment, that's a defining moment, and it could be very painful. You could feel like you were missed, overlooked, undervalued. You could get really bitter. And then 5 years from now, you could say that was the best experience of my life. I'm so glad I got fired, because if I hadn't got fired, then I never would have done XYZ. So we need to look back. This is the orientation part, is looking back and interpreting the events in my life that have happened to me and why they happened. And can I find the good out of them, or can I only find the bad, you know? So that's kind of important too in our identity, because we might have become the villain because we believe the things that someone told me about myself as a young person. And we didn't look back and see the good, and therefore like, whoa, I could have become the hero, right? The hero and the villain are not that different. They just they took a wrong turn somewhere. Then it just started going really bad.
Like right now in your life, what are you most passionate about?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, we all do a lot of stuff, right? And then, like, what are you most passionate about? Yeah. Um, I like to give pause. I mean, I feel like I know the answer in some ways, but I feel like I'm always trying to answer that question. Um, so I don't like have it locked down, but I do feel like um, there's two things that come to mind. One is the ancient word discipleship. In fact, I got a tattoo on my arm here. One is for the thrift store that I worked at. It's their banner. So I say I got my stripes because I did 6 years in that basement. But I got my stripes. But below that is the Greek word that's disciple or make disciples. And discipleship really means, or disciple really means learner. So someone who's learning. So I'm all about helping people take next steps in life so they get unstuck, whatever their next step is. And I don't want to tell them what their next step is. I just want to help them take it because I believe that it'll unlock great things for them when they take that next step. So that's one big area of my life. And the other big thing is make hope tangible. That's my mission statement in life, or tagline, make hope tangible, because hope is so elusive. Nobody knows what it is. So how do I make it so people understand it and they can see it? So I do a lot of projects, books, videos, talks, whatever I can to make it understandable, tangible. So I'm passionate about that. And so I'm passionate about my business because my business helps people to take next steps. And then I'm passionate about my nonprofit because I'm in the trenches of life with people that are going through the hardest and darkest of times. And we are looking for radical hope. We are looking for ways out of this suffering and struggle and breaking cycles that destroy families, communities. So I love that. So I'm like in a sweet spot in my life right now. Like I've been through a lot of pain, a lot of struggle, a lot of failure, like a lot of failure. But right now I feel like I'm getting into the sweet spot of my life, and I'm excited about it.
Can you talk a little bit about your nonprofit? What is the primary goal or mission of your nonprofit?
Yeah. So I'm like 3 weeks on the job. And so we're defining our mission statement right now. And so it basically, before I came on board, and this is pretty true to what we're going to do in the future, is we're about relief, renewal, and relief, restoration, and renewal. So those 3 R's are really important. So relief is like, if you're in suffering, we want to like meet you where you're at right now, help you get some relief. Restoration is, let's say you've been struggling with addiction. We want to help provide a pathway for you to, overcome that addiction. So we have like Celebrate Recovery, which is helping people struggling with addiction. Relief is a food pantry, clothing pantry, care fund, money to help you if you have you're about to get evicted, that kind of thing. And then the third one is renewal. So we believe that, these problems that people have some kind of roots. Let's get to the bottom of this. What is the source of your problems that keep on popping up? Let's look into your life. So we have counseling. We have church partners that come along and build community. So sometimes people are just lonely and they just need community. And they maybe have a faith, but it's kind of like lost. So they need, that'll help them in their life. Or maybe it's understanding finances and they need a course in that, or maybe they need a job and they just need help getting a job. So just kind of the root things in life. So that's I would say our mission statement, if I could be so bold, is just to increase hope to overcome troubles and trauma. Just to say that's what we want to do. And we're going to meet you with radical hope in the hardest and darkest of times. And they've been doing it for quite a few years now. And I'm just, I'll be their first executive director to take us to the next step. I can't reveal that yet because it hasn't been approved by the board, but we're getting there. We're getting to some bigger things, not better, but bigger.
And that leads me to my next question here. Something that you said, you mentioned your failures, a lot of failures. And I've found in my life that that's where I've found the most opportunity, the biggest lessons. And I'm wondering if you'd feel comfortable enough sharing one of your big opportunities that came from, maybe a dark time in your life.
Yeah, sure. So there's a few to choose from. I think one that I can highlight here is I would say, I don't know if you heard of I think it's called, I can't remember the name of the book. It's a leadership book. Maybe it's Leadership Timeline, but he talks about the leadership crisis. So every leader goes through a crisis. And this was probably my crisis because I was on top of the world in a way. I was ambitious. I felt like I had the plan. Like it seemed like things were coming together. We had just raised $70,000 to accomplish a mission. My wife and I and daughter went to Ecuador. We were going to do some work there. We were going to go into Cuba. We were going to go into different places and just work with young people and work with nonprofits and that kind of thing. And I get down there and then it was the perfect storm. Like everything went wrong. And people went different directions and we became disoriented. Talk about needing hope, orientation, you need to be oriented. I was totally disoriented, didn't know what to do. And then I just started making bad decisions, namely going Ronin. And I think a lot of leaders do this. We go Ronin, a Ronin is a samurai without a lord, right? And we just think we can do it without serving a lord. And serving someone, just being accountable without having a bigger cause than ourselves. So I thought I was the man. I thought the world revolved around me. I was going to be done my way, and I just started to run into some conflicts with other leaders, and they weren't getting resolved well because I didn't have humility and I didn't have the bigger picture. And I didn't ask questions. I wasn't curious. I didn't ask questions to find out what the bigger picture was. I just thought, what I got going on is the most important thing. Help me figure it out. So I ended up, it was kind of a train wreck. We ended up, we thought we were going to be living in Latin America our whole lives. And we came back in less than 2 years, and with my tail between my legs, and nothing really to show for it, it seemed. So probably the greatest lessons, right, were in that crisis. I learned humility. Well, kind of. I learned that I should be humble. It wasn't until the thrift store years, 6 years in the thrift store, that I learned humility. And I learned it from a woman who could outpace me. Like she was so a worker. Like she taught me work ethic. Like I never even understood. Like she was amazing. So I learned it from a woman. And I learned great humility, and but so yeah, that was the biggest lesson out of that came later, but that I needed to learn. And then second was I was able to plant a couple seeds in Senegal, Africa, and I have a video on YouTube you can watch called a tree in Africa. If you do a tree in Africa, Rob Mattox, the algorithms buried it so much, but you can probably still find it. It's got about 10,000 views. But we sowed a few seeds into Senegal of a leader. We invested in a leader by creating a documentary. And this documentary went wild for him to establish a work that he's doing there. He's working with boys that are more or less homeless and on the streets begging for food. And somehow you turn that into a thriving community with living quarters, with schools, with helping women do business, education. Like it was just like total radical, like paradise, like what do you call it? An oasis in the desert. And so I'm thankful that I got to invest in this leader's life and see this incredible thing that happened in this country. And that's what Dealers in Hope. I have a story about that in there of the transformation, shaping culture. So yeah, that's my biggest failure. I was a train wreck, but there's redemption.
Thank you very much for sharing that. And I'm wondering if you could talk, I don't know, briefly about what you view as your biggest success.
That's a great defining success, man. That's been a hard one throughout my whole life. But
Well, maybe put it this way. What are you
yeah,
most proud of?
I think my biggest success is my family. My wife and I married 26 years this past year, celebrating in Puerto Rico for 5 days. And, our 2 daughters, biological daughters, our 2 adopted sons. The picture's messy right now. Like if you were to look at a photo of us, there's a lot of wrinkles in that photo. There's some rips. There's some, even maybe, some times when those kids didn't want to be in the family, like they wanted to be out, and a lot of pain, a lot of, so that photo is pretty rough looking. But there is, I think my wife and I keep the photo on our as you walk in, is of all of us together. We had one Christmas where we were all together, and it was just beautiful. It was just good to be together and feel like we loved each other for a few moments. So it's not as successful as I want it to be, but I feel like my wife and I are the constant in their chaos. And so her and I we are a dynamic duo. We are a force to be reckoned with. When we're together, we are close to unstoppable. She's a nurse, has been for most of her life. She is an amazing woman. Who's kept me together, but also kept our family together. So that's got to be, without a doubt.
Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you feel is important to leave the viewers with, or the listeners, either
Yeah.
way?
Yeah, there's a one-liner that I want to leave people with. A one-liner is not your tagline, but it's kind of diving into the deep pain and problems of the world, and then the solution, and how this is actually going to make everything better. So I like to quote Thoreau, and he said that most people lead lives of quiet desperation, and they go to the grave with the song still in them. And so I found that my job is to make sure people don't die like that. I want to help people get their song, their message out to the world. Maybe that's just to their family. Maybe it's just to themselves. They need a message that's really strong. Maybe it's marketing, as I have a marketing business. So maybe it's getting it out to an audience. So that's my passion, is to help people figure out the words that they can meditate on, that'll make them stronger. The song that's in them, get that out, because it's so hard to get that message out, just out of your heart and out of that song to be sung. It's trapped in there. So that's my thing. And then the invitation is go to my website. It's foresightmarketingguide.com/hope dealer. And on there, you can find a way to get my book. And then also find out what I'm doing in terms of my marketing. And then pointcarecenter.com is the nonprofit. So Point Care Center. So that's, yeah. So if anyone wants help with those kind of things, I am here to work with them. And I appreciate you, Dave. Appreciate your passion for leading people.
I feel like doing this podcast has really helped me meet a lot of incredible people that I otherwise would have never met, and allow the audience to meet them as well, because there's a lot of hope out there.
Yeah. A lot of cool stories, and I'm glad you're bringing them to light. So
no, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today, and I will have the links to your website and links to your book in the show notes. And uh, if you don't mind sending me the link to the Hope assessment, I'll put that in there as well. So,
yeah,
that would be great.
absolutely. And to all your listeners, keep listening to Dave. He sounds like a great place to be. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this episode of From Embers to Excellence. Please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Follow me on your favorite podcast platform and visit hollenbachleadership.com for additional content. My goal is and always will be to add value to as many people as possible. So if I can be of any assistance to you or someone you know, please connect with me via email or on one of my social media accounts, linked on the homepage of my website. Remember, our failures don't define us unless we let them, and the only true measure of a leader is the success of their team.